Hey guys, it's Danny. Welcome to another Orchid Care for Beginners series, or should I say more advanced beginners. Today we are talking about pot size. I am going to address some things. Hopefully it's going to be a short and sweet video in order to hopefully demystify a little bit, maybe some questions you might have about pot size at this point. You're not a beginner anymore. You've done all the correct steps, but now you're noticing that people on the internet use all sorts of buckets for their orchids. What gives? Well, I shall tell you all about it today. And then the choice is yours. That's the beauty of this hobby. You can choose if you want to do something or use something. It's really up to you and how you feel comfortable, but it's always good to know why things happen, and definitely it's always good to know other people's experience, especially after so many years of trying all sorts of stuff. So before we start, today's video is of course sponsored by rePotme.com, who offers you everything you could possibly need to properly take care of your orchids, from bucket pots that I've used recently to potting mixes, fertilizers, accessories, even grow lights, and everything in between. And not only for orchids, but also for other houseplants as well. So feel free to check them out at any time in the description below or in the pinned comment. And with that said, I don't have a companion. I need to bring my bucket orchid. You don't know my bucket orchid? Hold on. There she be. It's been a day or two ever since I potted it here. She's already looking more hydrated. Let's look at the list and see, what do we start with? Oh yes, what's the deal with the pot size? Why is it so important? You might have noticed, maybe not so much for me in these tutorials, but you might have noticed that many people put a lot of emphasis on the appropriate pot size. Do not put orchids in bigger pots, because awful things will happen. I have to let you in on a secret. When you're a very early beginner, it is a good idea for you to just follow rules without question. Just follow those rules. It's going to be in your benefit. It's fine. After a year or so, we're going to talk more about it. And this is the let's talk more about it. So it's just physics. A smaller container can hold less water than a big container, right? So there is less water to evaporate. When you're at the beginning, and this is based solely on the most common mistakes people do. When you're at the beginning, it's always better for you to keep your orchid more on the dry side. So just to make it even safer for you, everybody recommends you to use smaller pots, just so you don't keep that orchid in water for 3 weeks and rot the roots or suffocate the roots. That's the whole reason behind it. That's all there is to it, I promise you. Based on my own experience, some people will still keep that advice even to advanced growers, but I have experimented a lot in my life, and I'll tell you my truth, right? So that's all there is to it. But now that you've gone through the beginner phase, let's talk the behind the scenes. You can put your orchid in whatever size pot you want. It itself doesn't care. It doesn't know it's in a pot. It just grows. If you give it the conditions it has been adapted to withstand, it's gonna grow. Or should I say its ancestors, because these are hybrids, right? But the genes pass on. So as long as you maintain that proper ratio of air and moisture in the pot, it doesn't matter the size of the pot. It can be this big. It does not care. The roots will grow as long as they have moisture and air. That's all there is to it. Now, finding the balance of moisture and air can be a little tricky, especially if you're at the beginning. So it is better for you, even if it might mean watering more often, it is just better for you in your first experience to maybe go with not such a bucket of a pot, right? If you want to go with the smallest pot you have, okay, fine, but try to strike a balance. And usually we say make sure that the roots fit and you still have some room for maybe 1 or 2 years growth. How do you know how much your orchid will grow in 1 or 2 years? You don't. So you just gotta do it and see what happens, pretty much. But that's why pot size is important. Now, of course, there will be some people that will say, no, for certain orchids, you need small pots. We shall address that. It hasn't been my experience. But anyway, just to clear off the whole debacle, that's why it's important. And some people I believe, took it a little bit too what's the word? Too literal, let's just say that. It's a little too much. We're still hanging on to that rule, which in my opinion has just been developed for beginners. So are we overthinking it? I believe yes, generally we are. It's okay to overthink it when you're at the beginning. We all did. I did too. Like, I spent nights overthinking things. And why did I choose that particular pot for that orchid? Is it that big? What's gonna happen next? No, we should not do that anymore. Yes, we are overthinking it. Yes, we're overthinking the fact that dendrobium likes small pots. No, they don't. They don't. They just like the same things as any other orchid. Do they grow better in small pots? No, they don't. You might say, yes, they grow fantastic in small pots. I'm gonna say they grow fantastic in big pots. Who's right? Both of us. And none of us at the same time. Because they just grow the same way in a small pot as they do in a big pot. The difference is you have to water more often. I don't like to water that often. That's all there is to it. So from my point of view, yes, we are severely overthinking the whole pot size situation. As long as we use some common sense and don't make a very, very water retentive and very suffocating medium and then use a bucket for our orchid, why would we do that? That's common sense at this point when we're not really, really beginners. So as long as we maintain things within the common sense limits, there is absolutely no point, in my opinion, to hang on to this rule, because for any example showing an orchid doing fantastic in a small pot, there is also an example of an orchid doing fantastic in a big pot. I draw the conclusion, of course based on my experience as well, that they do just as fine in both types of pots. So there is no reason for us to lose sleep over it. I've lost enough sleep thinking about the pot size at the beginning. I'm not about to do that again, and I advise you not to do it either. Right, so what is the problem with big pots? They dry slow. Now, obviously, again, going back to the common sense thing, if you have a very, very humid environment, maybe a cooler environment, even if you make sure that your medium is well aerated, your pot will definitely dry slower than the exact same setup in my environment. That is a fact, of course. Will it dry slower than like 2 weeks? I don't know. That's just up to you to find out if you discover or you have already a feel for your environment that, listen, this is not gonna benefit me and my orchid. Absolutely don't use like the buckets that I use. You don't have to. You always have to use what is okay for you. And finding what works better for you takes a little bit of trial and error. But I would say that you would not be prompted to do trial and error if you stuck to the rule, right? So that's why I'm pro abolishing the rule with the small pots, just because I want you to experiment. Who knows what you'll discover? You might discover things that I didn't even dream of, and it will benefit us all. So that's the main issue with big pots. Everything else, like, I don't know, the roots don't like it because they don't feel. That's nonsense in my opinion. It never happened to me that an orchid, I don't know, didn't feel right in a big pot. It has nothing to do with that. It will grow. Yes, roots like to attach to stuff. They will attach to the bark inside. They will eventually grow to the side of the pot. Even in this bucket, it takes literally 1 month for a root that's in a hurry to reach the side of the pot. It's nothing to do with that in my experience. The roots will find the sides of the pot because they can grow super long, and they do so fast in the growing season. So that is, in my opinion, the only concern with big pots. And also, of course, after that comes like your ease of use. It takes up a lot of space, right? I would not put all of my orchids in something like this. They do take up a lot of space, but this one is special. This is my big lip white phalaenopsis that I like, and I know she needs a lot of water. So, I would not put everybody in something like this just because I don't have space. So I'm gonna water the other guys a little bit more frequently. What to do? Now, what if your orchid is potted in a small pot? Again, there's no problem. Orchids don't actually suffer from pot size like maybe other houseplants do, especially the terrestrial ones. You have many instances of plants that if they reach the sides of the pot, they will just stop growing altogether because they will feel like that's the confined space they're in, and they will adapt their top part to their low part, let's put it like that. They will adapt their leaves and whatever's on the top to the root system. Cannot have like really such a tiny root system for such a big plant. Some plants really don't like to have a tiny root system to support an entire big leaf system, let's say. So they will stop growing if they feel confined. Orchids don't do that because they know, and I use this term loosely just for the fun of it. They don't really know. They have been adapted. They evolved in environments that are not confining, in environments that are open, like trees and branches and stuff. They know that they always have space. No matter how crowded they are, it's fine. There's always space. And if they're crowded, it just means they're attaching to a root or a piece of bark, and that's good. You'll never see a Phalaenopsis suffering from a small pot unless you don't water it enough. Because one thing that happens with small pots is that they just don't retain water, and as an orchid grows and develops more roots, it will require more and more water and nutrients, but like water is the main issue. So with a small pot, you'll maybe sometimes have the issue of dehydration. You potted your orchid in the pot in the first month or two, it was absolutely fine, but now all of a sudden it dries so fast and you just don't have time. You have work, you have kids, you have all of these things you need to do. The last thing you want to do is water your orchid once or twice a day. Not really, like once a day or once every 2 days. It's an us problem more than anything. So that's like the issue with small pots as well. Do orchids hate them? No. Do we hate them? Sometimes. I personally do. I hate small pots because I live in such a dry and warm environment. It might benefit you to use smaller pots. It's fine. There is no right and wrong when it comes to big pots or small pots. It's just how you adapt them or if you choose them in the correct instance. But fear not. There is a way to make bigger pots work, or smaller pots as well if you feel like you want to use smaller pots. And this is by adjusting the medium you use inside of them. Since a big pot can retain more water, maybe it is advisable for you to use more non-water retentive media, or maybe a mixture of like sphagnum moss, which is water retentive, with more bark. Now, bark doesn't really retain water, but it can trap water within its pieces. So that's how bark retains water for the orchid. It doesn't absorb it. And you know, if you have a pot full of bark, it's always layered. It's always drier at the surface and wet at the bottom. That's because the water can actually fall down. Bark only traps water. It doesn't keep it in its structure unless it's very degraded. Sphagnum moss, on the other hand, it absorbs the water and keeps it in its structure, so it's better at evening out. But it's also more water retentive. So in a big pot, using maybe a combination of that water retentiveness of moss coupled with a lot of bark that retains more air than water, maybe that is the key to making these things work out for you. Even if you're in a warm or dry environment, just stuffing this with sphagnum moss, maybe not the best idea. Maybe it is. You have to try it. Also, with the smaller pots, if you don't want to water your orchid once a day, maybe in that tinier pot, use more water retentive materials. Focus maybe more on the water retentive side. And of course, there are always extremes. If you have a super humid environment, maybe a small pot with just bark is enough and works great for you. Again, it's not about who's better, small pots or big pots. Even though I like big pots better, you know, it's not about that. It's about what serves you better. And in order to learn and discover what is better, you need to let go of the small pot theory. You need to try. And, you know, there is no way for anybody to tell you what's good for you because we don't live where you live. But we can tell you, listen, these are the guidelines. Trial and error. Good luck. Have fun. It's fun. Don't worry. We cannot tell you exactly what will work, but we can give you the guidelines. But for sure, I strongly believe that if you give up the rule, you'll be more inclined to try things. Right. And again, the last thing that I want to talk about is, did I ever actually notice orchids suffering in big pots? No. And I'll tell you why. Because as a beginner, I started with the small pot rule. And that is a good rule to start for a very, very fresh beginner. Because it keeps you safe. We don't know what we're doing. None of us. We weren't born with the knowledge. Some of us might have a greener thumb than others. But when it comes to orchids, I believe we're kind of starting at zero, all of us, because they're just so different than other houseplants. And I think some of you will relate to this. You might be super good with growing cacti, I don't know, something that is not necessarily like an orchid. But then you get an orchid and it's like I don't know what I'm doing. It's normal, it happens. So yes, following the small pot rule is very good at the beginning. And I followed it and I didn't really have any issues. At some point I just started to water way too often. So I thought there must be a better way. So gradually I started to use bigger and bigger and bigger pots. Started to get more and more comments about, oh, that pot is too big. Yes, well, we'll see what happens with that. Nothing bad happened. And of course, I started to have, as I gained experience, I started to have like a feel for, okay, this medium is too suffocating or it stays too wet. I need to add more elements to make it airy and so on. It's a feel thing. You're not gonna get it from the first try, probably. You're not gonna get it in the very beginning, but as we stop being early beginners and start getting more into the intermediate stage, we start to have a feel for what's too wet, what's not so airy, what's too airy maybe, and so on. And that feel will just get better and better. You'll never stop learning things or discover things. I didn't, for sure. But you have to just trial and error. You have to just do it. So as far as I'm concerned, no, I've never had bad effects from overpotting orchids. You might have, some people might have, and that's normal. That's just part of the trial and error until you find like the pot size and the style that works best for you. But again, orchids don't mind. They don't care. They don't know. So just put whatever orchid you want in whatever type of pot you want and see what happens pretty much. That's not the best advice, right? But it is the most honest advice. Right, so with that said, that is about it for today's topic, pot size. It's a doozy, right? Well, it's not that deep, it's just the pot. So I hope you will be inspired to just try. It might not work out. Try with maybe a Phalaenopsis that you don't care for as much, maybe. But try. It's fun. It keeps the hobby fresh and alive and keeps you interested, I believe. And it's just, at the end of the day, it's just fun. So with that said, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed today's topic. And let me know your experiences down below. Thank you, rePotme, for sponsoring yet another Orchid Care for beginners or intermediate growers. And with that said, I'll see you all next time. Bye.